I'm the Doctor. I'm a Time Lord. I'm from the planet Gallifrey in the constellation of Cerberus.
I hope the ears are a bit less conspicuous this time.
You might be a doctor, but I am
I'm a doctor, but probably not the one you expect. Absolutely fantastic.
All of time and space, everything that ever happened or ever will. Where do you want to start?
Hello everybody and welcome back to Bigger on the Inside. This is a slightly different episode. If you were expecting to tune in and hear me and Harry talk about Series 1, Episode 7, I believe it's called The Long Game, you will be bitterly disappointed and we'll have to wait till next week because Harry's away this week and I've had to replace Harry with another Doctor Who friend of mine called Harrison. Hi Harrison.
Hello, Governor. Hello, mate.
The reason I got Harrison is because what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about some Big Finish. I've only listened to a handful of Big Finish. Harrison, I know you've got a fair amount of Big Finish stuff.
Yeah. Yes, mate. You're not wrong. I've got a couple. I've got about over 12 now, maybe 18, I think.
That's
which
not
is
too
quite
bad.
handy. Yeah, from my old eras.
Yeah, because I know when we first spoke, we were talking about Doctor Who, and you mentioned your favourite Doctor is Paul McGann, who really has only done Big Finish, apart from the TV movie.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's just, if anything, he's just my iconic of all the Doctors. Just hearing him on audio, his episodes on audio, yes, I mean, obviously they're audio only, but I believe he's the most underrated actor to play the Doctor, and I don't believe he really has the credit that he deserves in the fan base.
I found out the other day that he's 60 years old, Paul McGann. He's 60.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, it doesn't look it, does he? He looks about 45. I know. I thought he was I thought he was about the same age as David Tennant, but no, he's considerably older. Yeah. Anyway, so
that changes everything.
Yeah, so we'll get to an episode you want to talk about a little later. First of all, is this week I listened to I've only listened to a handful of Big Finish. I listened to, is it The Light at the End of what's it called? The Light at the End.
The Light at the End. Oh,
yes, the 50th
one, yeah.
The 50th anniversary Big Finish special they did. I've listened to that.
40th.
Was it the 40th or was it the 50th?
Yeah.
Are you sure it was the 40th? Oh, rightio. So I listened to that one. I've listened to a couple of others like now and again, but the one I most recently listened to was called Vengeance.
Ooh.
Are you familiar with Cold Vengeance?
On Arrows or just Vengeance?
Cold Vengeance, which is I believe it's the third and final of the second volume of David Tennant Doctor Who stories.
Oh, right. Okay, I haven't heard of it, so it'd be interesting.
Oh, right, okay, it'd be interesting. I won't go too much into the plot because I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't listened. But it's volume 2 of the David Tennant stories. It features David Tennant and Billy Piper playing the Doctor and Rose. I believe there is now a third volume. I'm not sure if there's a fourth volume.
Hopefully.
I know the third volume has Donna in it, I think, or I could be completely wrong. The story is written by Matt Flinton, who's actually gone on from this. I had a quick look into him. He's actually written a hell of a lot of Doctor Who magazine comics and has written around 15 other Doctor Who stories within the main arc. He's gone on to write I believe he went on to write for the unit stories and some of the other mainstream Big Finish stories. You know, the stories with Colin Baker, Peter Davison, the ones you'd probably pick. The story basically follows the 10th Doctor and Rose arriving on a spaceship called Coldstar, which is basically a freezer satellite for a sort of a new world. When this new world starts up, it's got frozen peas on it, burgers, chips, fish fingers, all that stuff's all on there for when this new world starts. And obviously, with it being a freezer, who do you expect to find hiding in the cold? The Ice Warriors. And this is actually the first time with Big Finish that they gave David Tennant a monster that we had previously seen on telly. Up to this point, I haven't listened to any of the other ones, but I believe up to this point the stories are all original monsters.
They are, yeah.
All right, what do you think of Big Finish's original monsters? Are they any good?
Yeah, so if I'm honest, yeah, absolutely. It's harder with the audio only, but a majority of them are honestly really great. Because obviously how they're able to play on the whole audio only aspect by having obviously a lot of the creatures only. But it is awesome, and you hear an audio of like who's your favourite of all the Doctors, and he's heading up against a classic, one of the classic from the classic series. It is really cool to hear the Ice Warriors.
Yeah, because I know before this, the only time we had the actual Return of the Ice Warriors was with Matt Smith.
Yes, it was in Cold War.
Yes, that's it. I thought it was Cold War. That's with Clara, isn't it? And that's like, I think that's season 7, season 8, season 7, season 7.
Yeah.
So that's a long way off before we're going to get to that episode. So I'm sure we can touch on it a little bit here, but so yeah, basically it's the first 10th Doctor Who TV character. Matt Flinton wrote it. He's also wrote for the Diary of River Song as well, which is, have you listened to any of those?
I haven't, but it's on my list.
I picked it because it was quite an easy introduction for me to get into. David Tennant is my Doctor that I watched on telly, so obviously I'm going to instantly gravitate towards his stories. So I picked.
It makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I really did think it fitted that sort of 2005 revival. I know this episode will have been set in Series 2, 2006, but it does sort of fit. It seems to fit the show really well. You could almost imagine this being within that second series arc. It doesn't feel out of place. There's a little robot in it, though, which I know you haven't listened to. I was hoping you might have listened to it before, but oh well. There's a little robot in it called, I believe the robot's called Management, or the Management, and he reminds me so much of the little robot Gadget from The Waters of Mars.
Oh, Gadget.
Yes. Do you notice some similarities where maybe the TV show has picked up from Big Finish, or Big Finish has picked up from the TV show?
Yeah, from like how you're describing it, yeah, because obviously, the enemy of this story, obviously, if David Tennant in that, is the Ice Warriors, and their home planet is like, on,
Mars.
Red Planet on Mars.
Yeah.
And obviously, how you get the robot was in the episode of Waters of Mars. So
yeah, I didn't even make that connection. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yes. There were a few things I disliked about it. Not a lot of things. The things I did dislike about it is I found some of the dialogue to be a little corny. Maybe some of the dialogue sounds better on page, but when it's actually performed or read out loud, it comes across a little corny. I know there was a line, I think it's Rose, and she basically walks into a room and everyone's pointing their guns at the Doctor and Rose, and she says, "One question, this is the Doctor, I'm Rose Tyler. What the heck's going on?" It's a good line on its own, but when it's in the episode, you sort of like, no one speaks like this.
No.
And it was really something like you sort of heard it and you went, "Oh, that doesn't land as well."
Yeah,
and a lot of the dialogue
take you out of it a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely 100%. A lot of the dialogue problems I did find with it were Rose-centered dialogue, because I didn't really feel like it sort of fitted Rose. I felt it was just like they just wrote for another sort of side character. It sort of felt like that.
Anyone could.
I sort of felt Clara could say it, Sarah Jane, Susan, any Doctor Who companion could say it. It didn't really seem to just be linked to Rose. Some of the sound levels were a little different because I was listening to it in my car while I was driving, and there's scenes where the characters are whispering. You have to turn it up quite a lot to hear what they're saying. So that got
imagine. Sorry.
Yeah, that got annoying a little bit, and there was a plot point. Slight spoilers for the episode. The Doctor and Rose get split up. The Doctor and Rose get split up, and they go off on their own adventures on the ship. And the Doctor does an announcement over the tannoy of the ship, and he does this announcement telling Rose to go to this one place, saying, "Rose, and if you're listening, go here." And then she starts going in this complete other direction. The side characters that she's with say, "Oh, where are you going? Why are we going this way? The Doctor told us to go here." And she goes, "Oh, I know the Doctor. I know he actually meant to go here. He's just trying to trick the Ice Warriors." And I sort of thought, she doesn't know that. That's just a guess.
Yeah, like, how can you know that? That's a huge presumption. Like, that's just a guess, isn't it?
Yeah. I may have, like I say, and I've
plot, I guess.
Yeah, and what I've always said from when we first started this podcast is, I like Doctor Who. Yeah. I like it a lot. I don't know everything about it, so I could have maybe missed something that maybe explained that a little bit better. But that, and I also found some of David Tennant's it seems to have warmed up more. Apparently, if I listen to Volume 1, to Volume 2,
Right.
there's a noticeable difference in how David Tennant sort of plays the Doctor just
Oh,
via
right, okay.
audio. So that'd be quite interesting to maybe go back or go forward and maybe see how it progresses. Because it was
Yeah.
sort of, there was points where I was sort of like, oh, I don't really know if you'd say it like that, or... But obviously, I've probably watched more episodes of the 10th Doctor than David Tennant has himself. I doubt he sits back and watches his own
True.
performance. So that's probably, yeah. So that's probably maybe why I pick up on little things like that. But all in all, I thought it was a really good
No,
episode.
cool.
Especially
No,
like
I'm
me,
glad to
you
hear
grew
that,
up-
mate.
If you grew up with that 2005 revival and you sort of immersed in that world, which I currently am rewatching the series with Harry, you do notice that it does fit in really well with that.
Yeah, man. I mean, like, I'm really, I'd like, you know, to hear you having him in your ears, like David Tennant. Like,
Yeah.
I presume it's a bit odd when you get into it, because it's like, how come he's not on the screen? How come he's not on the telly? So,
He's a bit
it's
strange at
changed
first,
your
yeah.
audio.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, I presume as you hear him in your ears and he goes, "How long's he?" or "Wow," you know,
Yeah.
like, I presume it's a lot to take in. But then, you know, it just it's like that for any incarnation who you begin on audio with. But for him, you know, he's an iconic Doctor to hundreds of
Yeah.
thousands.
Perhaps like with Paul, when we get into your story, because I did listen to a little
Yeah.
bit of it just to sort of get into it a bit.
Ooh,
Yeah. I'm not as familiar with the 8th Doctor's performance, and this was really one of the only times where I've seen the 8th Doctor. I've seen the TV movie long ago, but, you know, not
it's
to remember.
I don't blame you, mate. It's not aged too well. So, if I'm honest.
I'm sure we'll watch it at some point.
Yeah.
But, you know, obviously knowing how the 10th Doctor would react on screen, only being able to hear his voice does take some getting used to. One thing that
It does.
another and I think maybe that's why I sort of noticed a lot of towards the end of the episode there's sort of an action scene, which is obviously hard to do with just audio. So there's a lot of characters going, "Don't worry, I've got hold of you. Oh no, now I've only got hold of one of your feet, and I can't reach this lever, and I can't do this." And I'm like, no, you wouldn't actually say this, but obviously because I can't see you, you have to rely on the dialogue of the characters to tell me what they're doing.
It's almost if the person who was like having to write it had to come up with that, so you know what to do. Like,
I imagine I imagine writing Big Finish. There is a more wide range of stories you can do, but then you are quite limited as well at the same time.
Oh god, yeah. I mean, it's how they're able to go anywhere with the canon. They're able to go anywhere, but in terms of action, they're gonna have like all points where the audience can't image exactly what's going on. Only if you hear the dialogue. Yeah, it's a learning curve really for like a newcomer.
Yeah, has there been much of Big Finish changing canon or affecting canon that you know of?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends if you class it as canons. So it's always a bit of a grey area in the community, in the Doctor Who community, is like the eras that we class as canon. Because if you know, what do you call it? When in the and they asked 8 to return.
Night of the Doctor,
yeah, in Night of the Doctor, and he was talking about as he's having the drink, he talks about others who he's had.
Yes, he does, doesn't he? Yeah.
He does, and obviously those people you can only hear about in audio. So then it was classed as canon, but then there's other areas. You know, you've got like earlier who's like heading up against like, you know, all elements that are in the era we have now of Doctor Who. So you got Hartnell against like, I don't know, like the Angels or something. I think that happens.
Okay, yeah.
And obviously, if you class that as canon or not, is up to you. It's a bit of a grey area. So there's elements that are and elements that aren't.
Yeah, because I followed Big Finish on Twitter, and I saw that one of their recent stories is the 5th Doctor going up against a Slovene.
Yeah, like wow! Like I didn't even know about that. You see?
That would look. I'm imagining it now, and it, you know what I can see in my brain looks really good. We just recently watched Aliens in London World War III, so I can't really remember the Doctor not knowing who. Oh no, he doesn't know. Yeah, he doesn't know who the Slovene are because it takes him a while to work out what planet they're from. I assume that the 5th Doctor is still ignorant to the fact that he doesn't know what planet the Slovene come from. Maybe you just have to take it with this version of the Doctor is 900 years old and Peter Davison is probably only about 200.
Yeah, true. He's
So
had a
there's a
lot
big
happen
gap.
to it. I mean, you kind of just got to take it on the chin, if I'm honest. It's just, you know what I mean? Obviously, if you include him as a one character, he's obviously been around for hundreds and thousands of years on end. So
Yeah.
yes, if there's an alien he was hanging out, with ages ago, in the future you might just completely forget. You might just have to kind of just gloss over it. But
Yeah. So the
You're not
episode
wrong.
you wanted to talk about, or the episode, well, because I asked you what episode you wanted to talk about, and I sort of made you pick Storm Warnings because I had it already.
yeah, no, it's cool.
It's Storm Warnings. So do you want to tell me a little bit about Storm Warnings?
Yes, of course, mate. So I decided to choose this. Well, I chose it myself. Mainly because what it is, it's quite important to the kind of the whole canon, really, of Doctor Who, just in general on audio, and if you count it in the timeline, really, of the show.
Yeah.
So what it is, it's the earliest audio of 8 after what happens on telly in the movie. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
what
his
happens
first-
to 8 after the movie.
It's his first audio adventures. It's the first time, I think it was about
Yes.
5 years from Paul McGann
Yes,
doing the
it
movie
was.
to doing the
Yeah,
audio.
Yeah, so it's about him after that, and it's just awesome to like hear him again having to play the role as a doctor, and
Yeah.
just kind of a heads up in terms of timing. I think this came out I think it was like in the it came out
2001
early
is
in
what
the
I've got here. So quite early.
yeah, it came out then, and Doctor Who the TV movie was 1990.
6, I want to say. 96, I believe.
Yeah, that's it. 1996. God.
Yeah.
So obviously for him, it was ages from the last time he played the Doctor. But then you hear him on audio. It is just incredible to hear him just head instantly into the role again, just as if he was always there.
Yeah, I know when I watched the interview with Tennant, he said it took him maybe about 2 takes to get back into the role, but after that he was back into it. So, and I think 5 years from, I think it maybe was about 5 years from Tennant doing Doctor Who to doing Big Finish, maybe a bit more. So I imagine, same for Paul as well. So I imagine it didn't take that long for him to sort of find that version of Doctor. You've listened to other Eighth Doctor stories, so does Paul's Doctor, obviously we know how the Eighth Doctor ends. Yeah. So do you notice that sort of change throughout the different stories?
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's actually handy with him. So I know there are other actors that they have in the range on audio, but he's the only one of the actors who actually he was able to play the character that has an arc throughout audios. So his audio end up having an arc, and they all go in an order. With everything else, you can just, if you're just hunting for anything else of any other actor who plays the Doctor, you could just hunt for it and hand it without caring about everything that comes after or before. But with him, it goes in an order, and there's like a character arc for him and the companions, and it all connects up. So absolutely, he changes over time, and he improves even more. You can, as you hear this, you can clearly, I don't know, like in about the opening hour, you are able to kind of opt to tell. It's just quite early for audio. Just it's not only early for him as the actor playing the Doctor, but it's early for just audio for the whole of the canon.
Yeah, I think this is only the 16th Doctor Who Big Finish story. So they've only done 16 before this.
Exactly so. So it's quite early on, obviously for them as a company, and you can kind of like tell that in places with like we were talking about earlier how the writers have to write, so you can actually image it in your head. You hear that a lot in the opening hour of this.
Yes, you do, especially when he's in the TARDIS and he's looking through all the different books and he's talking about. I think there's even a line where the Doctor says, "Why am I talking to myself?"
Yeah, he says that, and it's a bit like, wow. I mean, obviously for him, he's got no clue, but for us, the audience, is because we haven't got a clue what's going on about his voice.
Yes.
So you're not wrong, but no, honestly. So heading into the plot then, if I'm allowed to, on Storm Warning, it's basically what it is. It's kind of like like on the plot line for Doctor Who anyway. It's kind of like on a classic outlay for like a Doctor Who plot where you have everything that's happened in history. You kind of You have this thing that's happened in history. You add in some aliens, add in a doctor, add in a companion. There's your plot.
Yes.
That's what it is, if I'm honest. But
Yeah.
it's really well handled.
Yeah, it is
so
Doctor Who, isn't it? There's no mistaking that
Yeah.
it's not a Doctor Who story.
It's Doctor Who. It's just all it is that it's on audio. It's just in your ears and it's not on the telly. But and it is quite an easy plot overall. But you know what you need to image is this is quite early on for his era. This is his opening to his era. So get the audience on again, on board. You want to use that. If it, you know the saying, if it ain't broke, fix it. You know? So it works well, but so what the plot is for this one is, so 8 is, he's just hanging about after the movie. Literally, just at the beginning of the episode, he's in his TARDIS. He is on his own at the start. He doesn't have a companion at the moment, but he's just on his own. And he ends up on, I think he's able to land on this thing that happened ages ago in history.
It's a big sort of blimp, isn't it?
Yeah, I forget the name of it. It's the 100. I don't know if it's the
R101, I think it's called.
101, that's it. The R101.
Yes.
He lands on that, and I think he lands it because he's having an issue with his TARDIS. I think there's animals out there. I think they're kind of like these.
They're like vultures, aren't they?
They're kind of like vultures. They remind me a lot, in Eccleston's era.
In Father's Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They remind me a lot of them, but they're just kind of they're out there. That's because there's this thing happening on the air cruiser, and that's having to cause an impact on history. And as a result, his TARDIS actually is a land on there because of those animals. They're able to draw away draw an energy from the TARDIS.
Yeah.
So he lands on there. These aliens are all about. But then as he's on there on his own, and you kind of hear his acting. You hear him getting into the role of the Doctor.
Yeah.
And I have to say, he is incredible.
Paul's really good. I've recently gone and watched a few interviews with Paul McGann, and even though he only did that TV movie, it didn't get picked up, and it wasn't maybe as well received by some, and it is by, I won't get into it. He had probably every right to go, screw this, I don't want to do Doctor Who, Yeah. But he's really committed to it. And when you watch him in interviews, he speaks very highly of like how he's now considered one of the Doctors, even though he only had that one physical appearance. He's still there. He probably would have been quite easy to have him written out of the show, written out as canon.
Yeah.
But maybe by having McCoy into McGann, by having that regeneration, you establish that that is canon, that's in this universe.
Definitely so.
Yeah, but I know you speak really highly of the episode because it was written by Alan Barnes, who then went on to write around 15 plus more Big Finish audio adventures. Really? Yeah, so obviously what you're saying is true. It must have been very well received. Up to the point where it was so well received that it's actually the first Big Finish audio drama to be broadcast weekly on the radio instead of just being a CD form.
Yeah, I heard about that because as I was on about earlier, all his audios anyway are like kind of in an arc. So I presume they play the others afterwards. I think they have. I know they played a couple of others that are like almost at the end of his his era on audio. Adding to it, but no, it's honestly as well for anyone anyone's hoping to get into audio on here anyway on the platform. I really do highly opt to go for this as your entry point because it's not only kind of like entering into the audio kind of like and having to get used to that, but it's also into the era of 8 as well, and you can hear what's happened to him and how he ends up into the War Doctor, and all his things that happened to him. There was a lot.
Because I'm just going through my Big Finish app now, and I'm looking at the purchases I've got. As mentioned, I've got Doctor Who Cold Vengeance. I've got Doctor Who Red with Sylvester McCoy.
Oh my God, Red!
Haven't listened to it yet. Doctor Who Storm Warnings, Doctor Who the Juggernauts, Colin Baker and Bonnie Langford.
Daleks.
Yeah, I Davros, Torchwood, Aliens and Monsters, and I've also got another Paul McGann episode, Time Works.
Oh, Time Works. Yes. That's a good one.
One thing that was really
very
noticeable.
Confusing.
Oh, is it? One thing that I was really noticeable between the episode I picked and the episode I listened to of yours, I think I listened to around about an hour of yours, an hour and a half, was the length. The David Tennant story was only 45, 50 minutes. The Paul McGann one's like 2 hours long.
2.5 hours.
Yeah.
That's the thing, isn't it? Because so how that happens is because of audio. It really depends on the era who you've got. So if you've got an actor who was in the our era currently of Doctor Who, in the
NuWho
modern era, each episode is, like it is how it is on TV. You hear the title play, you have the time limit of that era for the Doctor. But because he didn't have an era of his own, 8 didn't have an era of his own on screen, they kind of just head with the layout of the classic era, which you got all your parts. I think each part's about half an hour to 14 minutes.
Yeah, I've recently been watching. I've been watching The Demons, which is a John Pertwee story, and that's got about 6 different parts, each part being only half an hour long. So it's quite interesting that the Big Finish have stuck with that format for the classic Doctors, and with NuWho, with David and probably Chris, when we listen to that next year, they've sort of stuck with the 45, 50-minute timeline.
Yes. No, of course. I mean, and if anything, if you hear you've got an audio that is going to go on for 2.5 hours, it is obviously at times. I have heard some audios that head on for about at that time length, and even if it's got 8 in it, and he is, I love him as a Doctor. It is hard at times if you aren't into the characters and aren't into it. Because obviously it heads on for quite a while. So it really does have to grab you right from the beginning. You really have got to image what's happening in your head to hold it to the end.
Yeah. So how are you listening to these? Because like I said, I listen to them in my car. How are you listening to these? Do you just put your headphones in and sit there? Yeah.
So basically, that's how I do it. So how I like to do it, I like to hear it with my I literally like to have it with on in my headphones. But I like to do it in my room. I like to turn off all the lights. I close my eyes. Hear it and just image it. To lay there. I mean, because it goes on at times, because obviously I'm quite into the 8 era. A majority of them can head on for quite a while. I don't always have the time to complete them all, but in like a whole, whole 2.5 hours just of hearing it. But I like to close my eyes and just image it.
Maybe that's one of the best ways to do it, especially if I'm driving. I'm trying to concentrate on not crashing and dying.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why sometimes maybe I've not lost interest, but sometimes like, what's going on now? What's this?
Yeah.
One character that I know picks up with Paul is the character of Charlotte, played by India Fisher. I'm guessing we won't touch on the movie, but from the movie, she's not in the movie. She is a Big Finish creation. So how long is she with Paul McGann's Doctor for? How much of an impact does she have?
Yeah, it's hard to talk about it without heading into the arcs in case anyone's interested. But in easy words, how should I describe it? She has an absolutely huge impact. She has a huge enough impact where, as of time now, she currently has her own audios.
Yes, I saw.
Adventures. She does, and I can't really tell you why that is because it kind of goes into all spoilers. But like her and a other in his era are kind of like his his people, his companions. You image David Tennant, you've got Eddie Piper there, and Donna Noble.
Yeah.
And Martha. He's got his crew like this, and these characters are huge. And I think it's him and her for I think it's on the 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, I believe it is. So they're hanging out for quite a while in audios anyway, and then I believe it goes into his the other part of his era, the next part of his era, off to Lucy, I think it is afterwards.
Okay, so with that in mind, with the arc of him having these different companions, is the Doctor we see in Night of the Doctor, that Paul McGann version, does it fit well with what we've seen in Big Finish?
Yeah, so it's quite interesting actually, because how he is in that that came out for the anniversary. He is, you hear him, he talks about the Time War. He doesn't want any part of the Time War. He wants keep out of it. And what's interesting is throughout all of his era, you kind of hear at a time, you kind of hear it as like the odd Easter egg, that you hear about this, like, how is coming, this upcoming war between this enemy that can't be hurt. And if you know the history, you're like, oh, I know what that is. That's the Time War. It's the Time War. And there's actually an audio era of 8, which is him around the Time War.
Okay.
And you're able to get that, and it's quite interesting because you I'm not going to get into it hugely, but you hear how 8 is in the Time War and how he's a part of it in a way, which is obviously all off screen, and how that ends up, how he is in the Doctor. So, but how he is at the moment, this is right at the beginning of his era in what we're talking about here. So obviously he has an arc, he has a hell of a journey to go on. But he ends up at the point where he doesn't want to be a part of the Time War, hence why the War Doctor comes along and he goes all guns blazing with Daleks. So,
Cool. So, we touched... Okay, well, so, out of 10, how much would you give this Paul McGann story?
In all honesty, if I can't hand halves, I'd hand it an 8.
Okay, so that's quite good. That's quite good.
Quite high for me.
I'm guessing with that ranking in mind that there must be Paul McGann stories for you that do reach 9s and 10s.
Yeah, absolutely there are. I mean, as I was on about earlier in this, yes, 8, he is my favourite incarnation, but only because of that. It isn't as if I like every episode, all his audios, because there are a couple of them which are
Yeah.
So, there are, but absolutely, there are higher, but only because this is kind of like his entry point into the canon. This is where, everyone's like, oh, wow, like, we're actually going to count him as the Doctor. We're not just going to pretend it didn't happen. And it's just really good to hear him just as the Doctor again for the first time. He's back.
So we touched on it briefly a few moments ago when I mentioned the way NuWho Big Finish has sort of kept that same 45-minute single episode structure.
Yeah.
And obviously next year we're going to be able to hear the Ninth Doctor Christopher Eccleston doing his Big Finish stories. What do you think? Because we've done a bonus episode on it, but I'm quite interested to hear what you think we might get from that.
Right. Yeah, so, here's what I'm hoping to have. So I honestly believe, I kind of hope it isn't just him and Rose. And it isn't because I hate that pairing. Yeah. It's just because we've kind of had it, and obviously we've had her and him, obviously, in their episode. And obviously you got her and David Tennant. And I kind of image her I don't really image her with him anymore. I kind of image her with David Tennant just because of the whole, like how they were, like hearts and all. But what I'm hoping to get from it is, in the opening to Rose, you hear Clive and he's talking about of like, when it comes to 9. So clearly, after the Time War, after what happened with her, and obviously after now the anniversary after he changes, I kind of hope the audios head from that point right up onto Rose and the opening episode. That's what I would like.
Yeah, that'd be good. It'd be quite interesting to see him come out of the War Doctor generation, maybe pick up there.
Yeah.
So you almost pick up right at the start of the Ninth Doctor.
Yeah, it'd just be really cool, because obviously each, almost every actor that's had the chance to play the role, they've kind of, at the beginning of their era, it's after their last incarnation's passed on, so you get that kind of early era, like, who am I? Am I, like, a nice man? Am I a good man? Who am I? Like, oh, like, ain't ginger, or I've got...
Yeah.
So you have those, like, awkward humour and whatnot, so it'd be cool to hear that off... Eccleston, and it'd be really interesting to hear, because obviously you kind of get that humour from each incarnation at the start of their life. But for him, obviously, he's just come out of the Time War, and he's going to believe that, like those Time Lords and Daleks, I killed them all. He's going to believe that. Yeah. And so it'd be cool to hear him enter into like a new life, to be like, oh my, I'm a murderer. It'd be quite interesting to hear that on audio, if that's the route they go down, which I'm hoping for. And it'd be even cooler to hear him go up against like iconic villains he didn't go up against his era, like Master, or even Elite, Delete.
Yeah, because we spoke about this. Me and Harry spoke about him possibly going up against the Master, but it's pretty well established that he is he believes himself to be the only Time Lord. When he meets Rose, he says, "I'm the only Time
Good
Lord."
point.
I guess what they could do is, if this is going to be set before Rose, you could have the Ninth Doctor face the Master, and maybe the Master believes, maybe the Doctor believes he's killed the Master, or that the Master has killed himself, so that when he does say, "I am the last of the Time Lords," he does actually believe it.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing is that, it's always a grey area, as we were talking earlier about audio, like what would you class as canon and what would you not class as canon, and you might just have to have a grey eye when it comes to the TV and how it connects. But it'd just be really cool. Like, as I said, it'd just be nice to hear him a little bit early on in his era, and you get to Rose. I mean, you could always have things happen in between that. But I kind of image how his era is, off to Rose, and it ends up part of the waves, and that's all joined up quite nicely. And I think just adding in audio into that would just kind of be like, so after Rose, he was off all the way over here, and then he gets to the end of the world. It just, I don't know.
Because I know
he signed would be nice.
He signed up for 12 episodes, 12 stories, and maybe it'd be quite interesting to see. Part of it set before he meets Rose and part of it with Rose. Because I know he's a big fan of when he's done conventions and interviews and stuff, and they've said, if you were going to return, what would you want? And, all this. And he's always said, I'd always want it to be with Billy, because it was always, Rose was his companion, which I guess would be slightly tricky to do if you were going to do it live action, because you could probably age him enough and with makeup to make him look like the Ninth Doctor again. He hasn't aged. He doesn't look that different. But obviously when Billy played Rose, she was, I think she was only about 22, 25, something like that. She was only about that age. That's 15 years ago. And I believe that, I'm not saying Billy doesn't look young, and I'm not saying anything about the way Billy looks, but Billy now doesn't look like she did when she first played Rose.
Yeah.
Because the way you age between being in your 20s to being in your late 30s, early 40s is drastically different to how you age from being in your mid-30s to early 50s. Exactly, yeah. So, I believe, they can sort of mess around with the timeline a bit, depending on how they do it. So, I also hope that if he's willing to do this, there's a chance he might return for the 60th in 2023. But we will just have to wait and see. I also know he's a big fan of Jodie, and he's worked with Jodie before on stage. So there's a lot. Know that. Yeah, there's a lot in in the fandom favour for Eccleston to hopefully return.
Right. Well, fingers crossed. That's all we can hope for, really.
It is.
As well. I mean, like him. I always recall when I was growing up, when he came like on the screen, he grabs her arm, and he tells her to run from the Autons. It's just like, that's the beginning of a lot of people's of their childhood. And so, yes, it'd be great for him to carry on with her, but it'd just be cool to hear him interact with a whole other companion. I like the sound of that idea.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you didn't get to talk about Storm Warnings before we wrap this up?
I don't think there is. It's just, as I said earlier, it is just iconic for his era of the Doctor, and it's just iconic for the audio in general, because this is kind of at the point where how they were like, right, let's have arcs in these audios, let's have them connect. And all beforehand, it was just like, I'm up for as a Colin tonight, I'll just hunt for a random audio and just hear it about and write about canon before after. But now there is a coherent tale here that goes across, and it really does get quite epic. But it ain't cheap though. If you want to listen to it all, that's what I'll say. But
it's something I noticed definitely. Yeah, is when because I know I think I spoke to you end of last year about Big Finish, and I said, "Oh, what do you recommend? Do you recommend Storm Warnings?" I basically went on the Big Finish website and I bought Storm Warnings, and I bought a Tennant one, and then I just bought some nice cheap episodes and stories that I know with Doctors that I'm vaguely familiar with, but would like to explore more.
Ooh. Any in particular?
I'm looking forward to Red.
Yeah, that one is it's incredible. It's a McCoy one. It's really I should describe it without having to use any harsh language. It's really all disturbing. That's all.
Oh, right, okay.
But it's handy for his era, because his incarnation was obviously quite a planner, and he had that alter side So it really works for his era, which is good. It's brilliant. You've got to listen to that. It's
Cool.
amazing.
Right, so, well, I guess we've spoken all we can speak about with Big Finish before we start repeating ourselves. Next week, it will probably be back to normal. We'll probably have the long game for you. These episodes are recorded fairly far in advance. If I remember rightly, this episode won't come out until the 7th of September, and it is currently the, 19th of July? 17th of August, July. I don't know where I got July from. 17th of August, so, quite far away, but hopefully you won't notice anything different. So
yeah, have it on your calendar, folks. Put it on your calendar. It's coming out. The content is coming, people. Don't you worry.
So yeah, as Harrison said, there is content everywhere. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, where you can get all our podcasts, all our bonus episodes. If you want little short secret videos and snippets on the podcast, you can check out our YouTube channel. It's all linked below. There's an email address as well if for some reason you want to send us an email. I don't know why.
Yeah, every little helps, as they say.
There's a Twitter account as well. That's @BiggerOnThePod. You can follow us on there as well. And that's about it. So thank you, Harrison, for coming on for this special episode.
No worries. Thank you for having me, kind sir.
I'm sure we'll do more Big Finish in the future. I know Harry's quite interested in Big Finish. So maybe to have the three of us on, we can all talk about Big Finish and good starting points outside of Storm Warning.
Yes, indeed. Alonzi.
Cool. So thanks for listening, guys, and we will see you next week. Say bye, Harrison.
See you later, guys. I hope you all get home safe. Yeah, thanks for coming on. Thank you.
Before I go, I just want to tell you were fantastic.